Hi everyone, welcome to today's Stellar GCSE to Oxbridge Success webinar. We have got people slowly joining the call. So while we are waiting for everybody, if you are currently here and just joining, if you could put in the chat to me, where are you joining from? And are you here by yourself or are you here with a parent or your child? So two things in the chat to me. Are you joining by yourself? Where are you joining from and who are you joining with? And if you can put that in the chat, I'll read out where people are joining us from right now. Right, who have we got? Nobody's messaging me. Is it like, maybe people can't message? Ah, the chat's disabled. Okay, let me try switching that on. Okay, right, let's try now. Put it in the chat now if you can. So where the questions I want to know the answer, thank you very much for alerting me of that. What I want to know is in the chat, where are you joining us from? Are you joining by yourself or with your parent or child? And I would love to be able to read some of these out. Okay, I've got somebody joining from London with parents, somebody joining from Northeast London, Sheffield, just a student. If you can join with a parent, this information would be extremely useful for parents as well, and it would help you because your parents are well informed about the process. So we've got some parents joining from London, Sheffield, just a student. The person who's joining there from Sheffield, I know that you're currently on our program. This was aimed at people who are just starting their Oxbridge preparation. So if you are just starting and we want that really decent introduction, a very comprehensive introduction, this is what you need to join. Somebody joining from Perth, just mum and dad. If you can join with your child, that's even better because they're the one who's going to be doing the application in the first place. We've got someone from Swindon, someone from London joining by themselves, Bristol with their mum. As I say, if you can get your parents in just for 30 minutes to 45 minutes, that would be great. Someone's here from New Zealand. Wow, very impressive. We've got somebody from Thailand, another person from Oxford, somebody from London. Bear with me 1 second. All right, okay, excellent. So I think without further ado, we will get started. Another question to you, just because we do have a few more people joining the call. What subject do you think you or your child is most likely to apply for? Because the other thing I want to emphasize about today's webinar is that it's basically really aimed at STEM students or people applying for social sciences like economics or medicine and related subjects. So those are kind of the core subjects that we are going to be targeting today. So people are saying a couple of computer science students. Who else have we got? We've got medicine, engineering, natural sciences, or maths. Yeah, great. Medicine, fantastic. Economics, medicine, maths, economics, biochemistry. Okay, excellent. Any more for any more? Yeah, we've got maths. Okay, great. These sound like the right kind of subjects. So I think this is going to be a great webinar for you guys. Ben, I think a few people might not have joined, so it might be worth sending just another reminder to people that the webinar is starting now, because I know we had a lot more people signing up. So, all right, well, before, let's just move on to the next slide. So today's webinar is called Stellar GCSEs to Oxbridge Success. So a lot of you here, either you or your child, and again, I really do encourage students to join this webinar, will have just sat your GCSEs, okay? And you're here because you or your son or daughter is likely to be predicted to achieve excellent GCSE grades, stellar GCSE grades. And you're here because you want to know what the next steps are if we want them to be successful at getting their place at Oxbridge. Okay, so this is a webinar for parents and students for STEM, for students applying for or wanting to apply to Oxford and Cambridge for STEM subjects, which is science, technology, engineering, and maths, or economics or medicine. Okay, so if that isn't one of, if that doesn't apply to you, maybe you just want to check, you know, is this webinar going to be relevant to me? But that's who this webinar is for. Okay, so moving on, before we start, I just want to quickly make you aware, go to the next slide, that we have at the Oxbridge Formula here written a book called The Oxbridge Formula, and it's been written by myself and my colleague here, Chris, and also one of our former students, Jess. If you want to know, we're going to be going through a lot of details about the Oxbridge application process today, but our book is even more detailed and will be able to give you very subject specific information for the subject that you or your son or daughter wants to apply for. So it's available on Amazon, and I strongly recommend it to both students and parents, especially those of you who are early in the process of finding out what is the Oxbridge application process. So I'll talk a little bit more about this book later, but you'll see that if you go to the following website address, which is oxbridgeformula.co.uk/Amazon-book, or alternatively, if you want to scan that QR code that's on the screen, you'll be able to kind of get yourself a copy of the book. I think I've got one behind me right here. It's quite a thick book. You're not expected to read all of it, but there's going to be a lot of subject specific information in there for you. So I would, again, strongly recommend that as a resource. Okay, so if we move on, who are we? So firstly, my name's Parul. I am the founder here at the Oxbridge Formula. And a little bit of background about me. I went to Oxford and I studied maths. I graduated quite a long time ago now with a first-class degree in maths, and I happened to score within the top 5% of my year group. After which I became a teacher. I'd always wanted to be a teacher, and I taught for about 10 years in top London grammar and independent schools, during which time I had the opportunity to mentor lots of students who were thinking of applying to Oxford and Cambridge. I was also I was the official Oxbridge STEM mentor in the last school that I worked in. Sorry, I think there's a problem with the chat. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, there you go. Right. But then what I tended to find is in schools, the advice or the Oxbridge coordinator in schools was often, you know, a historian or a classicist or an English graduate, because, you know, these are people who can really help people with personal statements. But the kind of subjects that we are helping students with, so that's, you know, the maths, engineering, computer science, technology, economics, medicine, these are very specialist subjects. And often the advice given to humanities or arts students by people who did those subjects just doesn't apply. So very frequently I would see the advice given to Oxbridge applicants, just read widely around your subject. Now I can tell you that a mathematician, or as a, you know, for any kind of hard science subject, like maths, physics, engineering, computer science, that advice really is nowhere close to enough or close to relevant enough to what you really need to do to get your place at Oxford or Cambridge. So I thought, well, why not start something run by Oxbridge STEM graduates? And by the way, I'm including economics within this, because for economics subjects at Oxford and Cambridge, you have to do critical thinking, problem solving, and maths tests. So I'm going to kind of include it within the same bracket. Those math tests are really difficult. The whole interview process is very problem solving based. And though, you know, the advice lots of students were getting just wasn't relevant and it wasn't helpful. So I thought, yeah, why not create something where it's created and run by Oxbridge STEM graduates, and teachers and tutors, experienced tutors, for students who are applying to those subjects. So we can do something very relevant to make sure that the advice they're getting is actually going to move the needle for them, is actually going to help them with the process. And that's kind of how the Oxbridge formula started. And then next on my picture, I've got Chris. Chris, if you just want to say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
So Chris is our lead tutor here at the Oxbridge formula. He is also our founding tutor. So a lot of the courses that we run, in fact, the majority of them have been authored by him. He is also an Oxford graduate. He has a first-class master's degree and undergraduate degree in maths and philosophy from Oxford, but also is very skilled at teaching, physics, critical thinking, problem solving, you name it. He is, very good at breaking down complex concepts into. Sorry, if we could just avoid putting things in the chat right now, that would be helpful. So if you have a question, if you could put it in the Q&A box instead of the chat. The chat, all of the messages also come to me, so it's kind of distracting, sorry. Okay, so if we could also, so Chris is our lead tutor here, and then we've got Grace. Grace is an Oxford medic, so she will be coming in towards the end. I know there are quite a few medics on the call, and she's going to be guiding any medics and answering any questions that you have about medicine. So that's our core team for today. I think there might be another Cambridge tutor joining us at the end, but we're just confirming them. So if you are thinking of applying to Cambridge, don't worry, there's going to be somebody here who can answer your questions. And if not, we have lots of information about that as well. I just want to quickly introduce the rest of the team as well. Lucy, if you want to quickly say hi to everybody.
Morning, everyone.
So Lucy is our programs manager here at the Oxbridge formula. You'll see later on that we do run programs to help students with Oxbridge applications, and Lucy is in charge of that program. Maya, if you want to say a quick hello.
Hi, everybody.
Maya is a Oxford chemistry graduate and also works with us here as a programs consultant. So you'll see at some points during this presentation, there'll be an opportunity to book a free consultation with us. So we can assess you, figure out your strengths and weaknesses, and also show you where we might be able to help you. And Maya will be one of the people who will be running those. And we've also got Ben here who helps us out with tech. So I just want to confirm from Ben, if you heard earlier, that we should just maybe send a quick reminder, because I think some people may not have received it. Okay. So if we can move to the next page, Ben, if you could confirm, that would be great. So these are just some of the students who have worked with us over the last couple of years and have been successful at gaining their places at Oxford and Cambridge. So we do very much know what we are talking about. So let's figure out what we're going to be talking about today. So firstly, what are Oxford and Cambridge looking for and why? So what are the key attributes that Oxford and Cambridge are looking for? And why are these so important for the way that Oxford and Cambridge do their teaching? Secondly, we're going to be looking at grades and competition. Now, this whole webinar is called Stellar GCSEs to Oxbridge Success. So what part do grades play in the application process? But then number 3 is saying the key hurdles for Oxbridge. So what does that imply? It implies that grades themselves aren't the key hurdle. There are a lot more hurdles to come if you want to be successful at getting your place, and we're going to be discussing what all of those are. And there is a lot more to the process than you might imagine if you don't know anything about it so far. Then the next one is the work that you're going to need to do to get in. So what work is it, and how much of it do you need to do? Is what we're going to be covering today. So let's move on. Firstly, what are Oxford and Cambridge looking for? So, we've called ourselves the Oxbridge Formula. Our book is called the Oxbridge Formula. And you might be wondering, well, is there really a formula for getting myself into Oxbridge? And yes, there is, and it's something that Oxford and Cambridge actually agree with. So the Oxbridge Formula is that your chances of getting into Oxbridge, the chances that you'll be successful with Oxbridge, are equal to the ability that you can demonstrate within the subjects that you're applying for, and your ability in general, your academic ability, then the passion that you demonstrate towards your subject. How enthusiastic are you about it? How much do you love it? How much extra research do you do? And beyond just what you normally do at school, how many supercurriculars do you do? And then the last thing is potential. So being good at your A-level subjects, your IB subjects is one thing, but how much more, how can you apply that knowledge to unfamiliar situations? So now let's have a look. Why are these three the key skills that Oxford and Cambridge are testing for? And it has everything to do with the way that teaching takes place in Oxford and Cambridge. So the teaching style at Oxford and Cambridge is quite unique. The first, I think, very unique thing is that Oxford and Cambridge, in addition to having lectures, have what is known as a tutorial or supervision, where you have one student or two students with one world-class leading expert in a, say, 1 hour discussion discussing your work. That's amazing. You're getting to discuss like concepts, ideas, with somebody who is a leading expert in the world in this thing on a one-to-one basis. So that's a really, really important thing to bear in mind. But because of that, and not just because of that, just because of the way Oxbridge works, there is a lot of independent work that is expected of you. So you need to be passionate about your subject. You need to be able to be motivated to go and do that work on your own, and you have to have a good ability and potential in your subject. You also are going to go to lectures, and then you're going to be given problem sheets or essays to do if you're applying for something like economics. But unlike at school, where you might, say you're doing maths at school, you get taught a technique and then you do 10 exercises on it. And, it's kind of the same thing, applying it again and again and again. That's not what it's going to be like here. You're going to be taught something in a lecture, and then you have to take it and apply it in quite a different way to the questions that you're going to be given in your problem sheets. They're going to be quite tough problems. You're going to, you might spend an hour per question on some of these. So having, well, firstly the potential, but also the passion to keep going when things are quite difficult or you're not quite sure what to do straight away are the skills that are required. Obviously, the academic standards at Oxford and Cambridge are very high, and all of the other students will also be very academically accomplished. The other reason why you might, and these are some of the reasons why you might choose to go there, but also the terms are very short and intense. And so what other students in other unis might be covering in 12 weeks, you'll be covering in 8 weeks. So you have to be quite prepared for that intensity. And a vacation is called a vacation and not a holiday, because you'll be vacating Oxford to kind of continue your studies. So we have short terms, but you're expected to do a lot of independent consolidation and catch up during those holidays. So you do really have to love your subject. And your degree classification comes mostly from exams. So a high academic potential is needed and not from coursework as other universities might have. So if you like that style of teaching, then Oxbridge is very much for you. So Chris, if you could talk us through then, why do you think the way that Oxbridge teach needs these three key skills or attributes?
Firstly, passion. So you might think of that as love of your subject, but it does have to be love of your subject as it will be at uni, because at university, not only do things become harder, but sometimes the subject just feels different, or it's taught differently. So things become much more abstract. Like me and Pavel are mathematicians. If you're applying for maths, you should know maths at uni is much more abstract and different than at school. Lots of subjects are similar. And there can also be, like some subjects are taught in very special ways you need to get used to. Like say engineering, medicine, you'll need to adapt to the practical parts and the academic side, both at the same time. So you need to have a passion for a subject as you'll be studying it, as it actually is. And that's needed because, as Pavel says, you've got very intense terms, you've got a high workload, but you'll be doing a lot of that independently or in very small groups. So you need to be motivated. You can't just have a teacher pushing you. You need to do the work on your own. Ability, well, as we said, you need the grades to get in, you need the academic ability to get in. So ability is about what knowledge and skills you currently have, like what you're taking from your GCSEs and then later A-levels. And everyone there is going to be one of the best A-level candidates or candidates in IB or one of the other types of exam. And then you've also got to show potential. So just because you're good at A-levels doesn't mean you're be suited to studying the subject further at university, and especially at Oxbridge. As Pavel said, you need to be teachable in a small group context, in tutorials or supervisions. So you need to be able to go into your tutorial or supervision, learn from the tutor, pick up on any advice they're giving you, and then immediately apply it. Like ask them the right questions. So you've got to be sort of mentally flexible, curious, able to learn and grow, as it says here. And also, as Pavel said, you've got to take what you learn in lectures and then apply them to unfamiliar problems, as that's part of the process of learning. Or say if you're doing a subject that includes essays, maybe you'd be just given a load of reading. You've got to apply that in some essay question. So you've got to learn independently by being able to take something you've just learned and being able to apply it. So that's what potential corresponds to.
Okay, thank you. So what's another reason why you might want to go to Oxbridge? Well, there are some subjects that are unique to Oxbridge or very rare elsewhere. So let's have a look. Firstly, you could combine multiple subjects together. So like natural sciences isn't a subject that's taught everywhere. Some places you might just do physics or just do biology, but at Cambridge, you can combine multiple subjects into this natural sciences course. PPE, you can do philosophy, politics, and economics together. And obviously Oxford philosophy is a very prestigious course. And at Oxford, you can do maths or physics or computer science with a subject like philosophy. So these are just some examples. And other subjects which are very unique. So land economy at Cambridge, I think it's the only university in the whole country which offers this course. And material science at Oxford, again, is, I don't know if it's completely unique, but it's definitely something that's not available everywhere. And some degrees are taught very differently at Oxford and Cambridge compared to other universities. So for example, engineering is taught as a general course. So you can't just apply for mechanical engineering or civil engineering. You have to just apply for engineering, and the first 2 years are general. So you have a basis across all disciplines, and then you'll specialize later. Similarly with medicine, well, medicine's a bit different actually. A lot of medicine courses, you will be doing clinical. In other words, you'll be doing hospital work alongside your academic studies. But at Oxford, it tends to be that the first 3 years are more academic and more theoretical. And then the practical clinical side comes in years 4, 5, and 6, which again, it's more of a traditional course in that sense. So the other thing that you might really like about Oxbridge is the fact that the communities are smaller. They have a collegiate system, and all of the colleges, it's like a smaller community within the university. So they, all of the colleges have a varied size and feel. You might have a more modern college or an older one, but these are the places which take care of your food, accommodation, and welfare. And the tutorials and supervisions that I mentioned earlier will take place in college with your tutors that are in your college, and the lectures will be more likely to be in your faculty, which is separate. Okay, and the other thing about Oxbridge is, frankly, the job prospects. So just having a look at the median graduate salary for students leaving particular universities after 5 years. Now, I'm not picking on Anglia Ruskin or Oxford Brookes. The reason I've got them there is they're in the same city. So Anglia Ruskin is in Cambridge. And so we're just trying to get rid of any geographical biases that there might be. So somebody who went to, say, Anglia Ruskin, after 5 years, their median salary is 19,000, whereas somebody who goes to Cambridge is 35,000. And for Oxford, somebody who went to Oxford Brookes, 22,000 versus Oxford University, 34,000. So you can see that there's a clear financial advantage. It's looked upon favorably by employers. For Russell groups in general, it's 28,000 is a median salary. So you can see that there is a good £7,000 or £8,000 difference in your annual salary if you went to Oxford and Cambridge versus other Russell Group unis, and about an £11,000 increase if you went to university in general. So those are great prospects there. What is it actually like living in Oxbridge though? So what's the atmosphere like? You know, ultimately it's not that different from other universities. The atmosphere does vary between colleges, and what I recommend is if you get a chance to go to an open day, go and get a gut feel of each of the places. There are some traditions, like I'll give you an example. In that picture there at the top, you can see those boys all have a carnation on them. And the way it works in Oxford is that on the first day of your exams, you wear a white carnation. In the middle days of your exams, you wear a pink carnation. On the last day of your exam, you wear a red carnation. So this is kind of a tradition. It doesn't really kind of mean a whole lot, but it's just a nice thing to do. Everyone does it. So I guess when you're walking on the street, you know if somebody's finished their exams or not. I guess the vibe, though, at Oxbridge is quite academic. You know, everyone is quite into their studies, but there is also a balance. I feel like it's quite a work hard, play hard environment. So people are very academically focused, but then they also equally on the extracurricular activities put in the same amount of enthusiasm. In terms of cost, the fees are the same as other Russell Group universities. So, you know, you might think it will be more expensive, but it's not. Subsidies and bursaries are available, especially if you come from a lower income background. The terms are shorter though. Remember we said there are only 8 weeks as opposed to 12. So that does mean that if you live in college, for example, that your accommodation costs will be lower because you do have to vacate during the vacations, but that means you're only paying for accommodation during term time. And it's difficult to have a job during term time. So you can work a few hours, but probably unlike other universities, it will be difficult to have, like, say, a 20-hour job per week while you're doing an Oxbridge degree, just because there is a lot of work to do. Okay, moving on. So this webinar was called Stellar GCSEs to Oxbridge Success. So again, a lot of you are probably here because you are thinking that you are going to get in the next couple of weeks a very good set of GCSEs. But what are the typical GCSEs that students get who are actually successful at getting their spaces at Oxbridge? So here are the average GCSE grades for Cambridge offer holders in 2019. Bear in mind, this is before the pandemic, but we're probably going back to a situation now where things are getting a bit more normal, as it were. So you can see the subjects we've got in this table are primarily the STEM subjects. Lucy, yeah, that's a yeah. So the first column there is telling, well, the second column there is telling us how many A and A star grades do they get. And for GCSEs, we're looking at grades 7 to 9. And we can see that everyone pretty much, the average GCSE grades were 9 or 10 A's and A stars. And the number of 8s and 9s, so the number of kind of A star grades was between 7 and 9 for all subjects. So if you haven't achieved those sorts of grades, or you're not on track, then I don't think it's impossible, because I want to say that these are average grades. And it might be that you come from a school where actually it's highly unlikely for people in your school to get those sorts of grades, in which case I don't want you to worry, because Oxford and Cambridge do take things into context. So what do they say? They say for UK students applying for an undergraduate course, we do look at information on the applicant's school, their neighbourhood, and their experience in the care system. If you live in a postcode where you know, the typical GCSE grades for your postcode aren't that high, just because of the kind of schooling that you might receive, then that will be taken into account. It says applicants from the most disadvantaged backgrounds will be strongly recommended to be shortlisted for interview, provided, now this is important, that they are predicted to achieve the standard conditional offer for the course. That means you have the right predicted grades for A level, even if you maybe didn't quite get the average grades for GCSE. And they have to perform to an appropriate standard in any required pre-interview admissions test. We've got a whole section on this later, but I want you to take careful note that predicted grades have to be the minimum that are needed for that course. And what's very important for getting into the interview is the admissions test. So we just go back very quickly. Was there anything else I wanted to say here? No, nothing more. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. Chris, talk us through then. These students here are just about to start their A-levels. It's worth them knowing what they should be aiming for in order to have the highest chance of getting into Oxbridge for these subjects. Can you just talk us through very quickly?
Okay, so if we start with Oxford, I think I might actually start at the bottom. So most humanities, the grade offer will be 3 A's, and that's what you need to achieve. Most STEM and social science subjects, you need an A star in one of the subjects. Sometimes they say which, like for computer science, it might be maths. And then there are some subjects which are maybe slightly more competitive, or there's more emphasis on the A-level grades than on, say, an admissions test. So like maths, you might need 2 A stars, chemistry and engineering the same. Just if you are doing IB instead of A-level, it's typically like 38 for humanities, 39 for STEM and social sciences, and then 40 if it's a very competitive course. If you're doing Scottish Highers, it's mostly 2 A's at high level and then 2 A's in the B. Cambridge, the easiest way to think about it is the A-level offers tend to be 1 grade higher. So humanities, you tend to need an A star compared to just 3 A's at Oxford. Most STEM subjects and economics, you need 2 A stars. Maths is slightly special because there isn't an admissions test before or when you apply. There's an admissions test after you receive your offer. So part of your offer is doing well in the maths admissions test, which is STEP, so that's extra. Cambridge notoriously has quite high IB offers, and Scottish Highers, they care about the difference between a high A, so an A1, and a low A, an A2. So they're 1 step more difficult than Oxford. Sorry, Paul, you're muted.
Sorry. Okay, that's fantastic. So, we are looking at a number of A's and A stars that students will need to achieve as a minimum. But if we look here, right, we've got admission stats. So let's just compare the STEM subjects to maybe non-STEM subjects. So English. So for Oxford, it has a 24% success rate. Like about a quarter of people that apply to English at Oxford get in, and about a third of people that apply to English at Cambridge get in. History, it's similar at 23% and 34%. And biology, we're looking at about 16% to 26. About 1/6, so 17% to a quarter, 26% of people getting in. And if we look at the average success rates for all subjects, it's about 21% at Oxford and 23% for Cambridge. But for international students, we're looking at an 8% chance of getting in from Oxford and a 12% chance of getting in from Cambridge. So you do need to be slightly aware if you're applying from another country other than the UK. However, go back, looking at those stats, you might think, well, that's not that bad. 1 in 3, 1 in 4 doesn't sound too bad. But what you'll notice that I haven't put on there, and we've kind of just shown you very briefly there, is the subjects which we are talking about today, the STEM subjects, the medicine, are all quite a bit more competitive than the averages here. So let's have a look. Okay, we'll start off with maybe the physics and engineering sort of subjects. So you can see here that physics it's about 12.5% really success rate. So 1 in 8 students. Physical natural sciences is about 1 in 6. Engineering is about 1 in 6. I think actually at Oxford now it might be more like 12% as well. These numbers might have been slightly updated since we made this presentation. So we're looking at a 1 in 8. But what are we saying here? We're saying 85% of people aren't successful at getting a place here. It's very competitive. Then let's go on to medicine, which is 9% and 6%. That's 1 in 11 or 1 in 6. Looking at economics, we've got Cambridge around 12%, so 1 in 8. PPE, 11%, 1 in 9. Economics and management is the most competitive course at the whole of Oxford and Cambridge. Around 6%. That's 1 in 17 students only that are successful at getting their places there. And then looking at the maths and computer science subjects, we've got maths around 11 or 15%, but you shouldn't be fooled into thinking that Cambridge is less competitive than Oxford. Cambridge is known to be the best university for maths in the world. And the step hurdle puts a lot of people off. So people applying for maths at Cambridge have already very much self-selected. So I would say both of those are fairly competitive. But computer science is hugely competitive across the board at both Oxford and Cambridge, with just 6 to 8% of students getting in. And I would say it's competitive in other universities as well. So if you're thinking of applying to, say, Imperial, I think it's 1 in 23 students that get in at Imperial. And so they also ask for the step papers. And we're going to be talking about admissions tests in just a second. So sorry, don't worry if you don't know what I'm talking about right now. But what I want to emphasize to you is these are really competitive courses. And that's why I'm really glad that you guys are here over a year before you actually make your application, so that you have the time to prepare and make sure that you are of the standard that's required. Now, there's one thing I want to note here, right? Which is that people who apply pretty much have to get the predicted grades, which are the offer requirement for that subject, right? So like, let's just say 90% of people that apply already have the right predicted grades. So if 90% of people have the predicted grades, then why are between 85 and 95% of people not able to get an offer, right? That's a question that I want you to really think about. And the pure and simple answer to that is A-level grades are the bare minimum requirement that students do have to achieve, but it's only the minimum. Because if you think about ability, passion, and potential, the A-level and IB kind of shows your ability to a certain extent. But Oxford and Cambridge need to do a lot more to determine your passion and potential in this subject, which is where those extra hurdles come in that we're going to be talking about in just a second. So let's move on. One of the reasons why those competition stats are so low, or sorry, I should say the competition is high, but the admission stats are so low, is because a lot of subjects over the last few years have seen a big increase in the number of students actually applying. So Chris, quickly talk us through these two, if you don't mind.
Okay, so computer science, over 5 years up to last year, the number of applications basically doubled. So you can see we're going from, I don't know, 900-ish there to more than 800-ish there to 1600-ish here, something like that. And the number of places hasn't really changed. So it has got twice as competitive in that period of time. For economics and medicine, they both follow a similar pattern. So that's why we're just showing medicine. The increase in applications is more like 50%, but you still have roughly the same number of places each year. So that's got like 50% more competitive. And other subjects have seen increases as well.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, so moving on. So you might think to yourself, oh my gosh, wow, these are so competitive. Is there even any point in me applying? Well, I think yes. Firstly, remember, Oxford and Cambridge are one of 5 of your choices overall. And I think if you give it your 100% best shot, there are so many benefits in you making this application. Firstly, preparing for Oxbridge will 100% make you better at your A-levels. I often hear concerns from students going, oh, but all this work I'm doing for my Oxbridge preparation, isn't that going to take away from my A-levels? Or I need to focus on my predicted grades. But the work you're doing, I don't know, say you're applying for engineering, you're going to be focusing on a lot of physics and maths preparation. And it's highly likely that your A-levels are going to be maths, and physics, at least for 3 of them. So if we're teaching you how to do problem solving, or you're learning how to do more unfamiliar problems in those subjects, that requires you to have an excellent understanding of your A-level material in the first place. So it is just going to make you far better at your A-levels. And I've got some anecdotal evidence to give you in just a second. The next thing is preparing for Oxbridge means you will hit the ground running at any university. Like, I'll give you an example again from for a personal example. I applied to do maths at Oxford and I didn't need the step paper. As we've just heard, it's a Cambridge test. And it's a very tough test aimed at just the top 2% of A-level mathematicians. But I was really passionate about my subject, and I said, yeah, you know what, I'm going to sit the step. Back then, about 15 or 17 years ago, whenever I did it, it wasn't the dumb thing to kind of go to your examination officer and ask to do this test. So anyway, I went and did it, and I did okay. But the work that I did to put in prepared me so much for the types of questions I was going to receive, or the types of questions an undergraduate degree would throw at me, that I hit the ground running when I went to Oxford. And pretty much every test that I did, every exam that I did when I was there, I got a first. And that's how I ended up getting one of the first. But I would definitely attribute a lot of that to the work I'd done in preparing for the step, which I didn't even need. So what I'm trying to say is, if you prepare for Oxbridge and you happen to get into Imperial and go to Imperial, I can assure you that you will be able to hit the ground running at another extremely good university. Okay. And lastly, you just won't have the regret of not trying. Like, a lot of students think, oh, I'm not sure if I'll get in, oh, I won't bother. But then they just never know. They could have got in, and they regret not actually having tried in the first place. So I think it's very well worth applying. And if we just go to the next page very quickly, I've got 2 quotes from parents of people who are on our program, from students who are on our program and were successful at gaining their places. But these quotes were given at the time when they hadn't, like, they'd finished the program with us, but they hadn't got their results yet. They hadn't got their offers. So one parent says, whether he gets into Oxford or not, the process of simply preparing for it with you has helped my son's A-level maths and further maths, and this is the word he uses, immeasurably. His confidence in approaching mathematical problems has definitely improved. And this is a parent of an Oxford Computer Science Mastermind student. And somebody else, they said the regular workshops boosted my son's confidence in both physics and maths. This is an engineering student, by the way. At school, he progressed from being the middle of his class to the top 1 or 2. And this student goes to a top grammar school. So that's a real big achievement. And he says, I consider this to be very worthwhile, irrespective of what happens in the Oxbridge application. And by the way, what did happen with this student is he got the highest possible score, 9.0, in one of the papers in his ENGA, and he got into Cambridge to study engineering. So the thing about, is applying for Oxbridge disparate from kind of doing A-level practice? Absolutely not, and that's some anecdotal evidence to show it. So let's have a look quickly at the next slide. Now, as you probably gathered by now, we do run a program which helps students maximize their chances of getting in to these really difficult to apply to subjects. And our success rate for students on our programs, at least the programs that we recommend for students after a consultation, is 3.25 to 4 times the national average, at least. And in some subjects, it's actually more. So if you think, yes, I would love to kickstart my application process, and I want to be mentored by and taught by people who actually have been through this process and know how to get me there, and have taught and helped hundreds of students with the application process, then do me 2 things. Scan that QR code, or if you don't have a phone handy, go to oxbridgeformula.co.uk/stellar-consultation. That is oxbridgeformula.co.uk/stellar-consultation. And Maya has also kindly put that in the chat, so you can just click on that link. And what you're going to get is kind of a calendar booking form to book in a chat with either myself, Maya, or one of our other colleagues, Jansu. So if we go to the next page very quickly, Chris, how does it work? Well, feel free to kind of, I'll talk while you're booking, but when you book, you're going to get sent an admissions, a mini assessment, which mirrors the style of questions you're going to get in an assessment, in your admissions test, and will also time you. So what we can then do is we can recommend support to you based on the results that you received in those tests. So what you'll do, here's a process. So number 1, you book the consultation. If we can point to that, that would be amazing. And then you're going to do the assessment. We'll then hold the consultation, during which we'll discuss the assessment results. And then you'll sign up and then, well, you'll sign up to a program and then you'll start working with us immediately. And we have our new programs starting for students who've just done their GCSEs at the beginning of September. So in the next couple of weeks is an ideal time to get booked onto a consultation with us so that we can get started immediately and you can make the very most of this program that we have on offer for you. Okay, if we move to the next slide then. So here is what some of our successful students have to say. These two are people who originally didn't work with us and didn't get in the first time and then worked with us and then was successful at getting in. All questions, if you don't mind to put them in the Q&A, that'd be fantastic. So Grace says, I applied initially to Oxford for maths and was unsuccessful primarily due to being unprepared for the admissions test. However, I was determined to study at Oxford and reapplied for physics. And the second time she applied, she worked with us. Studying with the Oxbridge formula transformed my ability to perform strongly in the exam, and I was consequently offered a place. And that was Grace. Giacomo said, having failed to secure an interview when I applied the first time, I reapplied knowing that I would have to drastically improve my preparation. By the way, guys, you guys are here just after year 11. We want to get you to a place where you don't need to reapply and you've just done the best you possibly can the first time around. He also says, this program, the Oxbridge Formula program, helped me succeed in the PAT and ultimately helped me secure a place at Balliol College. Okay, so what else do we have? Somebody says about our program, we covered really tough problems that you have to puzzle over. It's very satisfying to get the answer when you only get a few small hints. Really useful for getting better at what to do when you're stuck. So we're actually teaching how to get unstuck. It's actually a great program. When you're doing the courses with a bunch of your peers, you can clearly identify what level you're currently working at and what more effort you have to put in. And this is really key because you're probably a top student at your school already, and now you're going to get to meet the other top students in other schools and actually suss out your competition. Lastly, I won't go into this too much, but a parent says, I'd recommend this program because it's tailor-made to fitting the needs of ambitious young people. It covers a wide range of areas to prepare them for entrance requirements and boost their confidence. The sessions are targeted towards the specific skills that students need. So if we can just have the QR code come up. Do we have that one on the next slide? No. Okay, so let's just, what I'll do is we'll have a 30 seconds to allow you to quickly sign up. Somebody said that they've got a daughter starting in year 10. If you could let me know what subject she's applying for. It kind of depends on the subjects. Are the tutors all still university students, or will there be proper teachers whose career it is to teach? Yes, we do have, for example, Chris, his career is to teach, and he is one of the core tutors on our program. So for medicine, okay, I don't think we need another medicine person. I see that's fine. And John, if you just let me know which subject your daughter wants to apply for, then I'll be able to kind of recommend further support accordingly. But yeah, let me just have a quick sip of water, and then in the next part we're going to be going through admissions tests and interviews, which are the key extra hurdles that you or your son or daughter will need to overcome in order to be successful at gaining their place to Oxbridge. Okay, so for STEM subjects, I think that, yes, there could be a one-to-one program, a Kickstarter program that we could put together for a year 10 student. which primarily will work on their own strengths and weaknesses and get them good with problem solving. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in figuring out now, then absolutely booking consultation would help. Okay, that's for the person asking for your 10 students. Right, let's move on then to the next slide. Right, so the key, if you have any questions, actually, if you could put them in the Q&A, I'll get to them all at the end when we go to our Q&A. Sorry that I won't necessarily be able to answer all of them immediately. All right, so what are the extra hurdles? We've got admissions tests and we've got interviews. So let's have a look quickly at the application timeline. All right, so what happens when? I guess a key important thing for you to bear in mind is that the UCAS application goes in, and for Oxford and Cambridge, the deadline is earlier than for all other universities, and the medicine deadline is earlier than for all other universities. So by the middle of October, 15th of October typically is the deadline, you need to put in your application. So you'll need to be writing your personal statement before that. But as we're going to see later on, the personal statement isn't really the most important part of the application process. Guys, if you could put your questions in the Q&A rather than the chat, then we can get to them all at the end. That'd be really great. Okay, so what happens next? So typically for most subjects, there is going to be a pre-interview admissions test. And the test will take place end of October, beginning of November. But it's before the interviews because it's used to determine who to invite to interview. Now, the biggest, you can imagine a big mistake would be thinking, oh, I'll do my UCAS application, and then in the month between October and November, I'll do my admissions test preparation. But this is the core important thing that for a lot of these subjects, you're going to be judged on far more than your personal statement. So that preparation needs to take place as early as possible. I would say from now, if you can, you want to start developing those skills. And you can see there that we've written from autumn of year 12 is when we want to start developing those skills and doing that admissions test preparation a lot more seriously from, say, January onwards.
It might be worth adding that some tests have just been moved to be like 4 days after the UCAS deadline, so there's less time then.
That is very true. Yeah, so they all used to be at the beginning of November, but this year, I think 3 or 4 of the tests were moved to be on the 18th and 19th of October, which is extremely stressful, I think, for students. So having that preparation started way earlier means that you are fully prepared by the time it comes to that day. Then we have interviews. Now, typically interviews at Oxford and Cambridge are academic in nature and they take place in December. And again, it would be a big mistake to think I'm going to just fit in all my interview prep between November and December. Firstly, I mean, I hear a lot of students say, oh, well, I'm not going to start my interview prep until I know I've got an interview. Now, in the last 2 or 3 years, Oxford have given one week's notice to invite students to interview. So it'll be like, I don't know, the 9th of December, and they'll say, send you an email, congratulations, you've been invited for an interview on the 16th of December. If you're waiting until that point to start your preparation, it is far too late. So we would recommend that you start your interview preparation from now again. And it's something that, you know, with STEM subjects, a lot of problem solving, and, you know, with humanities or social science subjects, that combined with reading is absolutely vital. And then if you're applying for maths or imperial computer science, your STEP and A-level preparation needs to be happening all throughout this time and continuing into year 13 as well. Now, there are going to be open days that you can attend throughout the year. And also you can look at trying to do some super curricular activities from now, so that when it comes to next year, writing your personal statement, you have all those activities to be able to add to it. And we'll discuss what the best super curriculars are to do at the end of this webinar. Now, what I also want to add in though is, where do we support students? So when you join us, say from now, we will be giving you access to online resources, regular workshops, and also one-to-one tuition, should you wish to go down that one-to-one route. Next summer, we'll be running summer schools, and then it gets quite intensive from, you know, year 12, year 13. So there'll be extra admissions test courses, group interview courses, and also one-to-one mock interviews closer to the time to really get you prepared. But we start the preparation from now. So we're getting that preparation going, and then we intensify it come next summer. Okay, is anyone having any issues hearing me? I've just had one message in the chat saying my voice is coming out a bit buzzy. Is anyone having issues hearing? If you could put it in the chat to me if you are. Okay, no issues. Perfect. All right, excellent. Okay, let's move on to the next page then. Oh, somebody's saying I'm lagging from time to time. Is anyone else experiencing that lag? Or it might be your internet connection, maybe. Anyone else experiencing that? Just okay. Okay. All right, fantastic. Okay, so now I don't think there's anything I can do about my mic, unfortunately. So sorry about that, guys. Is it impossible to hear me, or is it?
No, it's fine. It's fine, Pavel.
Okay, all right. So in admissions tests, right? So the next thing is, why are admissions tests used? Now we've already said that that's what's going to really select you, because most people are going to get the predicted grades. And it's because A-levels and GCSEs simply aren't enough of a differentiator. So what Oxford and Cambridge want to test is problem solving instead of just knowledge. And they want to do it under intense time pressure. These admissions tests are far more time pressured than your A-levels are going to be. Again, we've already said they want to test your ability and potential. How easily can you apply your knowledge to unfamiliar problems? And it's essentially a funnel, right? They can't invite everybody to interview, so they need something in between to decide and determine who they're going to invite to interview in the end. These tests have been refined over the years, changed, refined, so that they correlate with eventual degree success. So a lot of these tests are quite new, and that's why they've been changing year on year. So what they've been doing is introducing new tests, and then when those students who went through those tests graduate, they'll see, okay, well, how well did this test correlate with how well this person did in the degree? And that's why they've been tweaking and changing the tests to make sure that these tests are a very good predictor of how well you would do in an Oxbridge degree. And they are even more important for STEM subjects than they are for humanities subjects, because, you know, writing that you're good at physics doesn't tell them that you're good at physics, because anyone could help you with your personal statement. But actually doing a test showing that you're good at physics is a real good indicator for them that you are. So they put a high weighting on these. Okay, Chris, talk us through the various admissions tests at Oxford and Cambridge.
Okay, so if we start with Oxford, for maths and computer science and joint degrees, you're doing the MAT. It has a multiple choice section at the start and then several long questions. Which long questions you choose depends on what subject you're applying for, and it's a maths test, as you'd expect. For physics, engineering, material science, and also joint courses with physics, you're doing the PAT, so the physics admissions test. It's similar to the math in that it's multiple choice at the start, then long questions after that, and it's almost 50-50 mix of maths and physics. For quite a lot of subjects, especially economics and social science ones, including PPE and economics and management, you'd be doing, also anything containing psychology, you'd be doing the TSA, so thinking skills assessment. It's a multiple choice test. There is also an essay section, but not all applicants have to do it. So for instance, economics and management applicants no longer have to do that. And the multiple choice part is what's called thinking skills. So that's a mixture of problem solving, which is the more quantitative side. So some kind of mathsy tasks, some logic, problem solving, spatial reasoning. And then the other half is critical thinking. So that's the more qualitative, it's text-based. So you're given a passage to read, you have to answer some questions, like identify the conclusion, identify any flaws in the argument, and so on. For medicine and also biomedical sciences, you do the BMAT, which is a very varied test. So it's got 2 multiple choice sections and then 1 essay section. The multiple choice sections, the first one is the same as the TSA, or very similar, just a bit shorter. And then the second section is multiple choice questions from maths and all 3 sciences, so physics, biology, and chemistry. None of the questions are optional, so you have to answer on all of those subjects. If we look at Cambridge, for maths, as we briefly mentioned before, There's a test called the STEP, which you do at the same time as your A-levels, so after you receive your offer. So whether you get in, whether you achieve your offer will be dependent on how you do in STEP. They are long answer questions. Obviously, they're on maths. They are very long and difficult. Like, STEP is notoriously difficult as a test. For computer science and economics has recently changed to use this test as well. You do the test of mathematics for university admissions, so it's a multiple choice maths test. It does have two papers. The first paper is maybe quite like the math multiple choice, but the second paper, there's a special focus on proof and logic, which is kind of unique to the TMUA. For engineering at Cambridge, you're doing the engineering admissions assessment. So that's a multiple choice maths and physics test. Then for natural sciences, the new degree used to be chemical engineering, now it's chemical engineering and biotechnology, and also veterinary medicine. You do the natural sciences admissions assessment. So it's similar in format to the ENGA. It's multiple choice science, maths and science questions. The unique thing is that you get to pick which science you want to do. So physics, biology, or chemistry, depending on what you're applying for and what you studied at school. And then the BMAT is the same as at Oxford. So it's got the three sections I described before. I think we want to just quickly discuss like how admissions test questions are different from A-level. So to do that, we are going to use some maths questions because those feature in lots of the tests. And we'll just if we compare to A-level, here's a A-level question on quadratics. And a couple of things I'll note are the instructions are very simple and straightforward. They tell you exactly what to do in each part. So express it like this, do this sketch, calculate a distance, and all straightforward tasks like calculations, and you know how many marks there are for each part. So that's what you might see at A-level, and GCSE questions you would have seen some of the things, depending on your exam board. If we compare to admissions tests, and I appreciate because you haven't studied A-level yet, you might not have studied all this material, but I just want to focus on the differences in format. Even without necessarily thinking about the math side of this at all, this looks more complicated. So you've got more letters and fewer numbers. So all of this depends on some letter K, which you don't know. The questions are very abstract. Like, again, they're not numerical calculations. Everything's in terms of, you basically think about this quantity K and how it affects your answer in all these different parts. It's a long question. There's lots of parts. And the tasks are, it says without evaluating. So you're not being asked to calculate. You're just asked to deduce it without doing any calculation in the first part. It just says write down. And then later parts are tasks like explain. How can this be transformed? And then at the end, again, explain why. So there's a lot more testing of your understanding and not just doing calculations. Also, you don't see exactly how many parts there are for each, how many marks there are for each part. So you kind of have to intuit yourself how difficult it's going to be and how much time you should spend. If you look at some multiple choice, that was a long maths question like you'd see in the MAT or the PAT maybe. If we look at some multiple choice questions, this is a thinking skills question. So you might see this in the TSA or the BMAT, so for economics or medicine. So here you have to read a passage. You have less than 2 minutes to do this. And this is maybe a medium-sized passage. So you have to do a bit of reading. The task is to work out which of the options, if true, would most weaken the argument. So you've got to read this passage, think about what the argument is, put that together in your head, and then decide what would most weaken it. And as I said, it's quite time pressured. All these tests are very time pressured. This is an example problem-solving question. So again, you might see this in the TSA or the BMAT. And it's spatial reasoning. So which of these shapes could you fold to make this? So if you're not immediately comfortable with doing this kind of thing, you might need to do a bit of practice. And there's a whole bunch of different tasks you can also do in these tests you need to get familiar with. And then we got an example of a science question. This one's chemistry, but you could see similar for biology and physics. Again, I'm not expecting you to have studied any A-level chemistry to understand this. Just if we look at the format, it tells you you've got 4 elements, which we call J, M, Q, and T. So you don't know what elements they are. They've just got some labels. And then you've got to figure out some stuff about them based on these reactions being possible, you asked which ones could be possible based on the order of reactivity. So two things about this. Firstly, as before, it's very abstract. And secondly, even as multiple choice is quite long, because your options aren't, oh, this is the possible one, or this is the possible one. There's going to be some selection of 3 that are possible. So you basically got to look at all of these and figure out which ones are and aren't possible, and then decide on your answer. So even though it's multiple choice, it can still take a fair bit of time. And again, these are quite time pressured. You'd have 1 minute to 2 minutes to do these questions. Pavel, do you want to talk through how we promote it?
Okay, yeah, perfect. So essentially, as Chris said, these tests are very time pressured, and they do require you to think far beyond the level of thinking that is required for A-level questions. So we want to build up your problem solving skills. We want to build up your critical thinking skills. And how do we do this? Now, we already mentioned earlier that we run regular workshops. So problem solving is one of those things where a lot of students tell us, once I know what I'm doing with a question, I'm able to kind of understand the solution and I'm good with it. But I just can't figure out how to get started with these questions because they're so different from anything I've ever seen. And that's where we're trying to build up your problem solving skills. So how do we do this? Through regular workshops. We run regular interactive workshops where students and tutors are working together and students are working with each other to give you skills to solve tough problems and teach you tricks for speeding up and gaining accuracy. And the other thing we do throughout our program is we give you regular mini mocks as well. So you can actually test how well you've applied the skills that you've learned. In our summer school, we're going to be, we cover key topics and techniques, and we practice problem solving. Everything is highly interactive. And again, we do full mock papers as well. So you get into that timed condition situation, which is being invigilated. And students do tell us that having that opportunity to do that and then receiving a mark and figuring out whether they're on track or not, or how on track are they, is an extremely beneficial part of the process, just as like GCSE mocks are super crucial in you getting that experience. Online resources. So we've made video solutions to basically every single past paper question for your test, but also you'll get access to lots of extra questions. Some of these admissions tests are quite new and don't have many past papers actually available. And it's not easy to find questions of the right level necessarily to work through. So we provide extra questions, but importantly, every single question is accompanied by a video solution. What is the advantage of that? Sometimes when you just read a written solution, you read it and then you've seen the answer and it's like, okay, well, I've now lost any ability to try that question on my own. But when you see a video, what you can do is you can get a little hint, you can pause it, and then you can try on your own. But furthermore, our tutors don't just describe how to do the question, because that's not the hard part. They're describing the thought processes that they use in order to figure out what to do in the question, which is the bit that students find more difficult. And that isn't something that's that easy to do in a written format. Whereas when they're talking through their thought processes, you're really getting inside their head and starting to think like them. And students who actually do use our online resources for a set number of hours a week that we ask them to, actually do see a huge improvement in their own performance. And then we also offer one-to-one tuition. So this is fantastic because in addition to everything else you're getting, now this is where your personal queries can be answered and you can make sure that you are you're getting those questions answered that you find the most difficult, but also we can work on your own weaknesses and you can get marked mocks, marked mock tests, marked homeworks, so that you have somebody to hold you accountable as well. So this is how we prepare you for admissions tests across the process. What do we have on the next page, Chris? So quickly scan that QR code. We have actually already had quite a few of you booking consultations with us. I don't know if we have many slots left actually over the next couple of weeks, but I would recommend getting booked in. I know that some of your GCSE results haven't come yet, but it's happening in the next week and a half. So I think that's when we have slots available for. So get yourself booked in, and it would be really great to have a chat with you and your parents, or you and your child. What do other people have to say about the program? So somebody said the program is very helpful. The teaching method allows you to take into account all the little things in solving exam questions that you would never otherwise notice, such as what kind of things would people not notice on their own? Special cases, nuances and definitions. This in turn has also improved my personal confidence, which is extremely helpful when it comes to real exam situations. Amazing. And somebody else says the program has definitely been incredibly useful so far and has already improved my knowledge and skills. The workshops are fun and engaging, and the online resources allow me to approach questions at pace that works best for me. So that is extremely helpful. And another parent also says that the Oxbridge Formula program gave a big boost to my son. Generally, his confidence has increased. Without the course, he wouldn't have been able to attempt as many questions as he could in the exam. He could attend interviews and various universities. He could attend, or is invited to, interviews at various universities and perform brilliantly. The program motivated him to push his boundaries. Okay. And if we, what we'll do is we actually have a video that I wanted to quickly show you guys right now. So Chris, if it's possible to maybe show that one, that would be fantastic. We might just need to stop the share anyway for the sound, so that could be great. And then we're going to continue after that with what the interview process is going to be like, what you need to do to prepare for it, and then finally at the end, what is the work that you need to do in order to what's the work that you need to do in order to make the most of the next few months. Lucy, I don't think Ben's seen your message. I don't think he's here anymore, just so you know.
Carol, are you ready for me to play this?
Yeah, go for it. Thank you.
We used the Oxbridge formula principally to help Henry with his interview for Oxford. So Henry was applying to read economics and management, and he managed to get an offer.
My child was applied for a specific college in Oxford for economics and management, and he got the college of his choice. What the Oxbridge formula gave him was...
Could you optimize for video?
It is optimized for video. I can de-optimize it.
No, it's fine. Sorry, I wasn't sure.
Content and structure and the discipline that he needed.
Jacob got an offer, which is awesome. From a parental perspective, coming from a school situation where we didn't feel there was enough experience to support his application for engineering, and then when we found you as experts with a weekly program and a structured study program using past papers and using tutorials, we always said if you're going to do it, you've got to give it your best shot. And we felt this program helped Jacob give it his best shot.
As a parent, I felt that some of the other companies had a structured approach and it was set more or less in stone. And however, the difference with Oxbridge Formula was I felt that it was very much able to adapt to the child's needs.
It was a very comprehensive approach. It gives the opportunity for him to be, to some extent, individualized, so he can really deal with those areas in which he might be weaker than in others and devote the right time to become stronger. Alejandro realized that to get into Oxford, he would really have to excel in many other areas. And not all the topics had been fully covered in school. So the program allowed him actually to explore and cover additional topics that were not covered in school. And thanks to that, he excelled at school as well. So it was a win-win situation, actually.
The program has been invaluable at getting to the level required to get into Oxbridge.
The key for getting shortlisting was probably getting a good TSS score. So Oxbridge Formula very much helped us in that process.
I guess my son is quite bright, and there is a good chance that he may have got the offer anyway, right? And I would say 20-30%. But being on the mastermind program, I think elevated that to a much higher percentage, maybe 80-90%. I would say. So it made the offer more likely.
One of the main things that Alejandro highlighted to us was this part of the one-to-one process, but not only the one-to-one tutor, but also that you will look for him, the tutor that suits him best.
What I got from the Oxbridge formula was more challenging questions and insight as to how to approach questions differently. I just think it's like a different way of seeing things than we were taught at school.
I'd say it's been so unbelievably useful in all the different techniques we've learned, all the different sessions, all the courses, just the amount of hours that I've had to be able to learn so many different things. And not only that, but being able to find out how much work I needed to put in. It's really helped boost my work ethic. And it's just been amazing. Thank you.
The Oxbridge Formula Mastermind program really exposed Arjun to many interesting questions, let's say, which you wouldn't necessarily be able to do just by doing an A-level course. He was able to do things much faster than he would otherwise be able to do. In particular, I would say the online work solutions, which are done by video, were really helpful. I think that is what saved him time in the test.
Not only the communication was brilliant, but also the care of the team, because it was not only the academic care, but also the patients. You are not only very high qualified professionals, but also the manage of the group of teenagers for us was outstanding.
Our experience of working with the Oxbridge formula was one of professionalism, quality of support to Henry, and ultimately delivery of what was promised. Yeah, no, I would absolutely recommend the Oxbridge formula to another parent in a heartbeat.
So as a parent, the Oxbridge formula, I believe, is both effective in what it does, as well as being friendly and fun. I would recommend the Oxbridge Formula Mastermind program for any parent whose child has ambitions to go to Oxbridge and is prepared to put the work in to make it happen.
The Mastermind program is intense, rewarding, effective, and useful.
Okay, so if you think that this program could be beneficial for you or your child, get yourself booked into a free consultation, and we will just put the QR code on the screen now, and then we're going to be carrying on with the presentation, and we're looking at interviews and also what is the right work to do in order to prepare yourself for Oxbridge. Okay, so we've got that on the screen there. I'll keep it on for another 30 seconds, have a quick break, and then we're going to be going straight into interviews. What's going to be asked to interview, how to prepare for interviews, and then the work. What is the right work? Okay, all right, let's continue then with the presentation. So what have we got next? Okay, interviews. So I think the most important thing to know and remember about an Oxbridge interview is that it is not a job interview. I think you might be still, sharing for, okay, that's better. It's not a job interview. So the kind of questions that they're going to ask you aren't going to be, why should we select you for this course, or what are your strengths and weaknesses, or they're not going to ask you scenario questions, for example. And if they do, they might just be there to kind of warm you up a little bit. What you're really going to be tested on is subject-specific questions. And I want to remind you of what an Oxbridge education looks like. You have the tutorials, you have the supervisions where you're going to be working one-on-one or two-to-one with a world-class expert in your subject. Now, in order for that teaching to be effective, they need to know that you're teachable, right? So they need to know that if they give you a hint, that you can respond to that hint. They need to know that you're going to actually communicate well with them and you are enthusiastic about your subject. What you've got to remember is that these tutors have spent their entire lives dedicating themselves to these subjects, and they want to work with people who enjoy the subject as much as they do. So yeah, I guess an interview emulates the tutorial or supervision and checks, would this candidate actually benefit from this style of teaching? So let's have a quick look, Chris, firstly at what might an interview question look like for the different subjects.
Okay, so if you're applying for maths or also computer science, they tend to be very mathematical interviews. You might have to sketch a graph. Maybe they tell you, here's a theorem, can you prove it? In a physics or engineering interview, you might have to do some maths as well, but in the physics part, you basically going to be given some kind of system to analyze. So it might be, okay, here's some particles and they collide, what happens? Or here's a circuit, can you work out what happens in the circuit? Chemistry, maybe you have to explain, okay, how would you make this chemical compound, or how would you detect it in a lab? Biology and also medicine, because medicine interviews are quite scientific interviews in Oxbridge. Maybe they'd say, okay, here's a symptom of a disease, or here's a change that happens in the human body, like what would be the possible causes and effects? Economics and also with the social sciences, maybe they'd say, okay, here's something that happened, what would the effect be on the economy? Or if it did happen, what would the effect be? Or they could show you a graph, like maybe a graph from some academic paper or something, and you've just got to interpret it and try and explain why the graph looks that way. Philosophy or politics, so a more discussion-based subject, you might see in PPE or a joint degree. Those ones, maybe it'd be more about critiquing an argument. So you might be given something to read beforehand, you have to critique that argument, or it would be, okay, here's a possible definition of this concept, like what's good and bad about the definition. And these are just a very limited number of examples for each subject. Obviously, there can be a lot more.
Okay, and looking at STEM interviews, again, as we've said, they are there to test your ability and potential just in the admissions test. However, they're also testing your passion. You can't really demonstrate your passion through an admissions test, but in an interview that very much can come across. So as I said already, they're looking for your teachability. How well do you respond to criticism and guidance? So imagine you're answering a question and then they say, but well, have you thought of this? And then you're like, yeah, but then you carry on going down your route and you don't actually change course and take into account their hints or feedback. That's probably not a good thing. So you need to incorporate what they're teaching you. They're also looking for how intuitive are you with your subject and how well do you understand it. But what are the attributes of a good interview? So, you know, eventually we want to reach an answer or a conclusion, especially for STEM subjects. Like normally there is an end goal. I guess for more discursive subjects, you might not necessarily always reach a conclusion, but certainly for STEM subjects you would. But it's not just about getting it right the first time. In an Oxbridge interview, they are expecting you to get stuck, because otherwise, how can they test how they can teach you, right? They want to get you to the point where you're at the edge of your comfort zone, and that's where they're going to try and get you out of your comfort zone and see how well you respond to the hints and guidance that they give you. But in order to do that, they're also not expecting you just to know the answer straight away. Part of being a good interviewee is knowing what the right questions are to ask. So for example, say you're presented with a maths question, maybe you would say, you know, I'm thinking it might be a good idea to differentiate. And then they could actually kind of respond back to you. The worst thing to do is to not say anything, is what I would say. So yeah, the other thing you can do is suggest good starting points for the question, express and apply technical concepts. So you might already know formulas or concepts or theory. Giving full and precise explanations. As I said just now, the worst thing you can do in an interview is go in and think silently in your head. And this is quite common because for math, when you're doing maths normally, or physics or a science subject, you're probably thinking in your head. And in the end, when you come up with the idea, that's when you start writing it down. But here that isn't enough, because imagine being in a tutorial where you spend half the time being really silent. Like, that doesn't make you come across as a very teachable student. So you have to be able to express your thought processes out loud in terms of what you're thinking about the problem. And yeah, like correcting your own thinking based on the feedback given by the interviewer and using the interviewer's comments to move forward are all key attributes of a good interview. Now, as Chris already just alluded to, medicine at Oxbridge is very much like a natural sciences interview. At other universities, you'll have like multiple mini interviews where it's like interview stations and you do role plays and you're testing your communication skills and so on. Grace can probably talk about this a little bit more. Actually, in fact, Grace, if I could ask you to talk about this a bit more now, how would you say that an Oxbridge interview for medicine potentially differs from, say, an MMI interview at another university?
Well, the Oxbridge interviews are panel, so you don't have different stations. You're sat there. You usually have 2 interviews at the college and you have 2 people interviewing you. And I would say it's definitely in recent times becoming a lot more of a mix. So it's definitely very science-based. You might get given a graph or a passage that they want you to talk about. So you've got to do something with the numbers, talk about the pros and cons of what you've been given, whether it's this new drug, has it got false positives, what's the rate of false negatives, what is the psychological impact that might have on somebody if it is a false positive and their families. And however, it is important to remember, whilst it is a very sciencey interview, you still do need to be talking about those core principles of the NHS and the 4 pillars. And in my interview, I did have a role play situation, which is quite unusual for Oxbridge. So I am aware that whilst they're definitely going to be sticking to science interviews, they are trying to integrate a bit more of that MMI aspect in. So just keeping both of those aspects in mind.
Okay, excellent. All right. So what we're saying is it is very scientific, but now they are starting to include some of the softer skills and testing those in interview as well. Okay, moving on. Economics interviews, Chris.
So they're still about some of the things we discussed on the previous slides. You still have to express yourself clearly. In fact, that's even more important because you can't just express yourself through maths or a graph. Words are going to be more important, although maths and a graph are still helpful. It's still about showing you're teachable. It's still about being able to adapt your thinking to new evidence, like notice when you've made a mistake, because sometimes the interviewer is going to point out, hey, did you consider this? You've got to react to that and adapt your own thinking. But there are some slight differences because it's not just solving a maths problem. So you've got to take on board new ideas or new arguments. Maybe, again, they could give you a passage beforehand to read. So you've got to absorb some new concepts and then use them. You've got to often argue a point. So it's not just achieving some numerical results. There's some discussion going on as well. As it says, you might have to use a written source you've been given before. And it's about argumentation. So like weighing up arguments, evaluating arguments, criticizing arguments. Basically, like, what are the reasons for this position, and do you agree with them? Your personal statement is slightly more important for economics and social science interviews than pure STEM science and maths interviews, except for medicine where it's more important. So you could be asked, if you said you've read something and you mentioned that in your personal statement, you could be asked about that, and they're going to be, I mean, if you're applying for physics and you say you've read a physics book, they might talk to you about it, but it's more as a warm-up. In an economics interview, they'd be more interested in what you actually say about it, and how you're evaluating the arguments from that book that you've read, for instance. If we just talk about interview prep quickly, so what can you actually do to prepare for these kinds of interviews? Well, actually, Powell, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, just as we said, an interview is designed to take you out of your comfort zone. So the more tough problem solving you can do, which already takes you out of your comfort zone, the more comfortable you're going to feel about these types of problems. So tough problem solving is definitely something I would strongly recommend. The next thing is mock interviews. And I think it's important for those mock interviews to be with somebody who is a subject specialist, because yes, you can do a mock interview, say maybe with your parents or with a friend. But remember, what's happening in an interview is that you're going to be taken to the edge of your comfort zone, and then they're going to teach you more and expect you to respond to it. Now, unless the person you're talking to is a subject specialist, that is actually going to be quite a hard thing to replicate. So anything where you can talk about your subject out loud is going to be helpful, but getting an interview with a subject specialist is going to be extremely helpful. And then I think that links to the fact that you want to get representative questions. I think that there are websites online where, you know, you see the kind of questions people have got before, like Student Room is a good one. But because those interview questions have been around on the internet for quite a long time, I think admissions tutors are kind of savvy to that and have changed the kind of questions that they're asking. It doesn't mean to say that that isn't a good place to start your preparation, but just be aware that you want to make sure that the questions you're getting are as representative as possible of the types of things that are being asked nowadays in interviews. And as I said already, just practicing explaining things in words. Like, even if you're working on like your homework, why don't you start talking through your thought processes out loud, you know, or think about what you would say if you were explaining what you were doing to somebody. This kind of thing can be very beneficial in getting you to feel confident about speaking through your thoughts in an interview situation. Okay, so here's a couple more of our former students, and they're talking about the help they got from us with their interview preparation. So Mikey says, I particularly appreciated the opportunity to do a realistic mock interview that I wouldn't have got to do at school. I received a realistic amount of help from the interviewer, so that's all that guidance and feedback. And then I got lots of useful feedback at the end that I could act on for the real thing. And then Bartol says, having gained a place to study engineering at Oxford, I know that using the program provided by the Oxbridge formula made all the difference in building my confidence in the PAT as well as in my success overall. So another few things to say about the interview. The interview course, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second, was very helpful. You really get a sense of where you need to improve and how to articulate answers or approach new problems. It's also great to see how other students answer the same questions. It really gets you to think. And I'm going to talk about why you're getting to see other students in just a sec. The tutors are great. They explain the concepts clearly and encourage you to think rather than spoon feeding you the answers. And this is really important as well. In our entire methodology of how we teach you here at the Oxbridge formula, we're not telling you the answers. We're getting you to think about them and facilitating you to think about, you to problem solve on your own. The tutors managed to create an understanding environment where you can actually learn from your mistakes. So if we have a look at the next slide. Oh, we've got a quote from a parent here. So one of the parents said, I asked my son whether he thought the mastermind program had helped him. And he was unequivocal that in that, without your help, he would have not even had a chance at passing the MAT. I think the structure of the tutorials is excellent. And the simple fact that you provide a framework and a plan to get each pupil ready for the MAT is incredibly beneficial. His experience so far has been great. I can honestly say he's never once not wanted to do the tutorials and workshops. His confidence in approaching mathematical problems has definitely improved. And that's from a computer science applicant's parent. So how do we prepare you for interviews? Well, we're going to give you tough problem solving questions, as I said already, in our workshops. And we'll discuss them and debate them leading up to the interview, and we're going to have interview level questions right from the beginning. We kind of want to get you prepared from now. You'll practice spoken explanations and justifying reasoning, because we actually get you to work in groups and you have to talk to each other and justify why you're thinking of doing what you're doing to each other. In summer schools and group interview, in our summer schools, we'll ask you to reframe and articulate questions and master problem solving techniques. And let me explain how our group interview courses work, because this is quite unique. Typically, and we don't have these for every single subject, but we do for a vast majority of them. You'll be in a Zoom call with 10 other students. Every student will receive their own interview, and you also get to watch the interviews of the other 9 students. So this is really beneficial for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's highly it's highly pressured doing this in front of, say, 9 other students. But that gets rid of the nerves, and people who have done this type of course in the past have said the real interview literally feels easy in comparison. And you know, you're going to get your own mock, your own very realistic, challenging mock. But while you're observing the other students, you're not just going to sit and watch, right? You're going to be working through those questions yourself at the same time. So by the end of that day, you'll have had exposure to 10 interviews worth of highly realistic, challenging questions. And you'll also come away with detailed written feedback for what you need to do to improve. You're also going to get, the other thing we provide is one-to-one mock interviews, and these are individual mock interviews with Oxbridge tutors, where you're going to get extensive feedback in between each one. And in the one-to-one tuition, we can identify and work on your weaknesses, and we can give you as many extra mocks as you need. But it's also useful to have another interviewer within the group interview courses and one-to-one mock interviews so that you're not familiar with them. But also the one-to-one tuition itself just emulates the Oxbridge tutorial and supervision system, which is what an interview is based around anyway. So what have we got on the next slide? I think we might be going on to the next topic, right? So if you want to give yourself an edge, or you want to give your child the edge, do apply to work with us. So we're going to keep that QR code on the screen very briefly. After this, we're going to be looking at what the right work is to do for Oxbridge, and we're going to be looking at the little handout that we gave you yesterday. And it's going to make it slightly more interactive for this part. We're going to see, what do you believe to be the most important things you need to do to ace your Oxbridge application? And after that, we've got a Q&A, and I have got Amir from Cambridge, who's joining us today, and Grace from Oxford, who are currently studying there, so they should be able to give you the most up-to-date information on life at Oxbridge. So get all your questions into the Q&A, but in the meantime, get yourself booked on to a consultation. I actually think that we did run out of slots. We've added a couple more, but make sure you do grab one of the slots available. So I'll keep that on there for another 10-15 seconds, give you a chance to sign up if you haven't already. And then we are going to move straight on to the next part of the presentation. By the way, guys, in the chat to me, how are you finding this webinar so far? What's been the most useful thing for you that you've learned? So if you could put that in the chat, I'll read some of those things out as well. And it also helps to make sure that we're giving you what you were sort of expecting in this webinar. Anyone in the chat to me? What are you finding useful so far? What have you found to be really interesting? Nobody's written to me so far. I'm feeling very sad. Okay, great. Somebody says, it's been good in that it's given details of exams and the types of questions that students would get asked. Anything else? Any more for any more? Somebody says the amount of work and preparation that is needed to be successful in your application. Yes, absolutely. Somebody says it has been really informative so far. I'd love to know any specifics about what you have specifically taken away from it so far. That would be really helpful. I'm guessing nobody's writing to me because you're all busy booking consultations, in which case that's fine. We'll get started again in 15 to 20 seconds. All right, so let's move on then. So what have we got on the next slide? Right, what is the work that you need to do to get into Oxbridge? Now, firstly, I want to talk about the amount of work. So we ask our students to do a minimum of 5 to 6 hours of additional work per week on top of their A-level subjects or IB subjects during term time, but we ask them to follow a structured study plan that we actually give them access to. So we tell you what to do, but we can't do the work for you. You've got to put the work in. So 5 to 6 hours is what we're looking at and is our expectation of students on our program. So looking at the next slide then, the question is, what is the work to do within those 5 to 6 hours? Now, this is what we gave you beforehand, right? So we've got these things: piano, DAV, computing project, MOOC, reading a book. A MOOC is a massive online open course, by the way. It's a big kind of online course. Reading a book, solving tough problems, work experience, trekking around Asia, your EPQ, past papers, and watching the news. And we asked you to rank in order of importance where you think each of these would fall for one of the following types of subjects. I believe it was a STEM subject. Is that the right one? Is it medicine? STEM, yeah, STEM subject first. But before we do that, let's just quickly go on to the slide before. So what I want to quickly emphasize is that if you look for the maths and science subjects, the green portion of it is how important the personal statement is. I believe that the personal statement for an Oxbridge application for a STEM subject doesn't really count for anything more than, say, 5% of the application. And that's because, as we said already, the admissions test and interview are significantly more important. Whereas for social sciences and medicine, although the personal statement isn't the biggest part by any means, it does play a slightly more of a role. Okay, and this is what is going to be kind of important in determining which parts are and aren't more important of those things. So if we go back one, Chris. So can we go back one? Yeah. Right. In the chat to me, I want everybody to participate in this, please. Of those things, for a STEM subjects, for a STEM, I'm looking at maths, engineering, computer science, physical, natural sciences, physics, chemistry, subjects like that. What do you think would be the things here which would be the least important to do? If you can put them in the chat to me now, what are those least important things? I'm not sure if anyone's still here. Well, I know people are still here, but nobody's writing to me in the chat. Okay, so we've got piano, watching the news. The least important is trekking around Asia. Somebody says piano, trekking around Asia, trekking around Asia. Okay, right. So piano and trekking around Asia have been deemed as being less important. Maybe watching the news. All right. What do you think would be of middle importance then? What do you think would be like? Yeah, this could be helpful, but it isn't the most helpful thing to do. What would you say for those ones? So we've got here reading a book, doing an EPQ, reading a book, piano, watching the news, work experience, EPQ, solving tough problems. Okay, interesting. And then therefore, what do you think is going to be of most importance? What do you think are the most important things to do to prepare for Oxbridge for a STEM subject? Okay, somebody says they think it's work experience. Somebody says work experience and past papers. A MOOC, work experience and EPQ. So EPQ, past papers and reading. Interesting, interesting. Most past papers, EPQ, MOOC. All the elements listed. Tough problems and an EPQ. Okay, well, I don't actually agree with all of those, interestingly. And I'm glad we're doing this exercise for this reason. So here is what we put. For a STEM subject like maths, physics, engineering, computer science, chemistry, the things that aren't really that important, and you kind of got most of these, are piano. Not many people said DAV, but maybe it wasn't on that list. I don't know. DAV, it's a good thing for your CV in general, probably, but it isn't something that really is going to have that much impact on whether you get into Oxbridge. Unless you did volunteering as part of it, which, oh no, that's not for STEM. Okay. So trekking around Asia, it's not really that relevant to your subjects. Watching the news, again, even if you were watching science news, fair enough, that shows a bit of potential, but really it's not having an impact on how you're going to do in your admissions tests and interviews, which are academic focused. All right, what have we got in the middle then? So actually, a lot of people were thinking that work experience was very important, and it really isn't. I would say the one subject where it might be slightly beneficial, but again, I don't think it would be that important, would be maybe engineering. But I don't think work experience plays a big role because you're applying for a very academic degree. What you're doing isn't going to be highly vocational there. So work experience isn't that important. Reading a book.
I was going to suggest maybe chemistry as well, because there's no admissions test. So the work experience is proportionally more useful.
Yes, that's true. So chemistry for Oxford doesn't have an admissions test anymore. Maybe it'll be slightly more important. For computer science, maybe slightly, but if you were doing your own projects in computer science, then it doesn't need to have work experience. You don't have to have done a job experience, I don't think. So we've got reading a book. Yeah, it's okay. It's good to do, but it's again not going to be one of the most important things you do. Then we can see we've got EPQ slightly more in the middle. We have heard from we went to a Cambridge teachers conference for STEM subjects, and they actually said that if you had the chance between doing EPQ or doing further maths, maybe it doesn't apply for biology, but for all the other subjects I mentioned, they far prefer you to do further maths than an EPQ. Because having that extra problem solving ability and that math skill is going to be very beneficial to you when you start university. And when you start uni, like the further maths content is covered in like 3 weeks. Whereas obviously you would spend a year doing it, so you're going to have a much better understanding of it if you, and it's less stressful if you've done it at school already. And then things like computing project or MOOC are quite important. I think they're relevant supercurricular activities, and they're good things to put in your personal statement, especially if you can talk about how they encouraged you or gave you more confidence that degree course is right for you. For example, if you did a computing project, or imagine you did a MOOC and you're going to be like learning more about that subject. Say you did a MOOC on AI and you're going to be learning more about AI in your degree course, then actually saying, oh, I did this and I'm really enthusiastic to learn more about this at university is a really good thing to put in your personal statement. So I think those are good.
I just wanted to say here, so out of the middle importance ones, the more important ones are the ones with an active component. So these ones are quite passive. You just turn up to work experience, you read the book, you're not actually doing anything. If you're doing a course where, like, a lot of MOOCs have like an assessment or some problems to solve, or if you're doing a project, obviously you're doing something active. That way, it's not just something you can write in your personal statement, oh, I'm interested in computer science because I did this thing. It can be you're developing your ability and potential through practice. You're doing some problem solving as part of doing these activities. So they're helpful for your admissions test and interview as well, in a way that more passive activities aren't.
Yeah. And then actually the most important thing is, okay, somebody says the EPQ is very active, but the thing is these degrees aren't about research. So an EPQ, you're doing practical research, a lot of reading, and you're summarizing your findings, but you're not being tested on your ability to research in the application process for Oxford and Cambridge. You're being tested on your ability to solve problems. So here, solving tough problems is probably the most important thing you can do. And where can you find a lot of those tough problems? It's within past papers. And past papers is a really crucial thing that you must make sure you do all the past papers and do them effectively. And we're going to look at what does effectively doing past papers mean in just a second. I think we need to move on because we're running out of time. Okay, economics, guys. What do you think are the least important things for economics? What would you say? You can use what we've got on this list to, I think people should know what they are by now, maybe. So, yeah, in the list to me, then in the chat, least important things for economics. Piano, I've got, somebody says. Come on, guys, participate. Okay, maybe we show the previous slide. Maybe people need to see. I don't know. What here? Okay, trekking, people say is not going to be relevant. What else? They're different for each subject. So I want to know, for economics, what do you think? Or social science subject? Not having many people contributing here. So we think piano and trekking aren't important. Okay, let's have a look. What do we put, Chris? Yeah, piano, DFE, trekking, and actually probably a computing project isn't that useful for economics. Okay, what have we got next? So then the things that are maybe a little bit more important or a bit more useful now, maybe work experience, a MOOC or an EPQ. But the things that are more important are solving tough problems, yes, because you still have that maths component to your application or the problem solving component. Past papers, yes, but now watching the news, so being up to date with current affairs and reading a book have suddenly become extremely important. Chris, anything you wanted to add?
Well, I think these two especially for interviews, it's much easier if you have some general knowledge to pull from when you're discussing interview questions.
Absolutely. Okay, and then for medicine, right, what do we believe is the least important for medicine? Grace, after we've done this, feel free to give your comments if you want. So somebody says piano, somebody says trekking. What else? Come on, give me some more interesting things. D of E. Okay, all right, let's go, Chris. So we've got piano, trekking, and computing project. Actually, probably doing a computing project isn't really necessarily going to help you with medicine. Here, maybe solving tough problems is not as relevant as it would have been for, say, maths or engineering. Doing a MOOC, yeah, it could be quite important. I've put DOV slightly further ahead there because it does have the service component. And so volunteering, I would say, is a really key thing that you need for your application process. So we put that towards a more important side. Reading a book, yeah, reading around the subject. Grace, if you want to talk about any of these after me, feel free to do that. Doing an EPQ is it's quite a good thing to do actually for Oxbridge medicine, because it demonstrates that you have an interest in research, and the degree has a component where you might need to do some research. And then watching the news and keeping up to date with current affairs in medicine is also really important. And then lastly, what's more important or most important, work experience is incredibly important for medicine, as are past papers in the UCAT, BMAT, and so on. So Grace, do you want to comment any further on this?
So for every single university, having work experience and volunteering is basically a must, whether it's Oxbridge or not. So it's incredibly important. For Oxbridge, at both Cambridge and Oxford, you have to do an intercalation. It's not voluntary. So therefore, you will have a research component to what you're doing. So you have to do a dissertation at Oxford. So doing an EPQ, I didn't personally do one, so it's not the be all and end all, but it's still quite up there. And in terms of also just talking about MOOCs, and I think things like reading a book and watching the news, kind of like what Chris said, they're very important, but unfortunately in medicine, there's so much you have to do for your application that I'd say those are things you should be doing more towards your interviews. So having an awareness of what's going on in the NHS and current affairs, because politics is something which does massively affect the NHS given it's taxpayer funded. So I'd say be really savvy with your time and kind of the week before your interview, watch the news every single night of the week. That's what I did.
Okay, excellent. What have we got next then? Thank you very much. All right, now important to note that an extracurricular activity is something that's non-subject related. So like piano, DOV, trekking, well, I wouldn't even say trekking is necessarily an extracurricular, but piano is an extracurricular activity, but a supercurricular is something that is subject related, but is outside of your curriculum. So what are some examples of this, Chris?
Okay, so say for maths and physics, you might do an Olympiad competition. For economics,
I think we've got more coming up on this. If you just want to click.
Oh yeah. I can show all of them if you want. For say economics and subjects with an essay component, there are essay competitions. So the John Locke Institute has an essay competition. That's just one example. If you can get an award in those, that's quite impressive. Doing your own projects, you mentioned that before. So EPQs are one example of that. Researching around a subject. Watching lectures, attending summer schools, if they're subject related. And doing online courses and MOOCs. I've just got a picture here from, this is MIT's online course finder. So they put all their first year undergraduate courses online. And a lot of those are actually useful for people applying for Oxbridge. Just do one of these. I don't know if these particular ones are super relevant, but you can, there's a lot of courses you can search through to see what you think might be useful. If we just look at some more specific subject-related supercurriculars, for maths, you can find websites where you can do problem solving. You can do additional modules from maths or further maths. So say you didn't do all the mechanics modules, maybe you pick an extra mechanics module to do or something, or decision maths, depending on what you're interested in. If you can do programming, that's useful for computer science, but also for maths because it involves problem solving, like solving mathematical or logical problems. But especially if you're doing computer science, presumably you're interested in that already. Science subjects, you can find what are called bridging problem books, so books that bridge the gap between A-level. And I appreciate because you haven't started your A-levels, you might want to wait a bit before you start these books, but these are books that bridge the gap between A-levels and university level content. So once you're some way into your A-levels, you might want to start looking at those to help prepare you. Doing practical hobbies, so something with a more like practical problem solving component. If you do robotics, maybe you have to learn about circuits, you've got to do some mechanical engineering, something like that. And programming is also useful for the sciences. You're actually...
Oh, Chris is cut out. I'm not sure. Oh dear. Okay. All right. So where was he? Programming is also important for sciences. I think engineering and physics, you can use quite a lot of programming. The economics, the kind of things that are useful are listening to current affairs podcasts, magazines like The Economist, obviously newspapers like Financial Times, reading historically significant economic texts. Now, I'm not an economist, so I'm not sure, but maybe like Adam Smith. Maybe. Also debates, doing things like Model United Nations. These are all really good things to be doing for economics and social sciences. And Grace, if you could talk us through the kind of extracurriculars for medicine, that would be fantastic. Supercurriculars, sorry.
So that includes things like volunteering. So the most ideal would be volunteering in a care home, but obviously some places have restrictions post-COVID. So any experience you can get working with the general public, whether that's in you might have a paid role and you work in a shop, or whether you go and volunteer at your local Rainbows or your Brownies group. Try and, if you have time, get a range of people. So I did a weekly work experience at a primary school because communicating with children is very different to communicating with adults. And then I did work experience, volunteering in a care home. And then work experience for medicine, particularly Oxbridge. Ideally, if you can go into some research place, I did work experience at AstraZeneca for a week. Because they do have that built in, so you can do GSK or any maybe local lab that you have, even if you can't get a week, maybe just 1 or 2 days. And then medical, signed up podcasts, news magazines, you can just watch kind of any documentary on how the NHS works, not necessarily to talk about in your personal statement, but more so you can draw to that when you're answering questions in your interview about the pressures you might face as a doctor.
Okay, fantastic. All right, moving on then. So
I think we just go on.
I was just going to say, if you want more examples and much more detailed examples and ideas for supercurriculars, for example, for podcasts and videos, we have more examples in our book, which is oxbridgeformula.co.uk/Amazon-book. That's where you can get it, or you can scan that QR code. Or if you go to the next slide, also we've got loads of reading lists for all of the subjects within that book as well. The only one we don't have is the medical subjects within those particular books, actually. However, it's probably something that if you want, you could just email us and we can send you some ideas afterwards as well. Okay, so how to work effectively. Let's quickly rush through this, because then I'd love to do the Q&A, and we're slightly delayed on that. So here are some issues. People spend too long on their personal statements and not enough time on their admissions tests. They spend too long choosing a college. They don't do enough practice questions, and they don't do enough timed practice questions. They might do them and then not mark them, or they don't do any interview focused preparation until like the very last minute. So what do you need to be able to do? You need to be able to plan your time well and cultivate, but make sure that you still have a work-life balance by making a timetable or a study plan. Let's look at an example study plan if we can, Chris.
Okay, so just as an example, the student's done a mock exam, maybe for the PAT, on a Monday evening. And that's a 2-hour paper, so maybe it takes them 2 hours in time conditions. But it says here marking/redo, so you're going to want to mark your answers, but before that, you do want to give yourself a chance to have a go at all the questions, because maybe you didn't finish in the time. So give yourself a chance to think about the questions more afterwards, and then you can start marking. And when you're marking, if you mark something wrong, you don't want to just immediately go and look at what the solution should have been. You want to give yourself a chance to figure out what you should have done instead. So think about it as deeply as you can before going to the solutions. And then maybe on the next day, then they go through, we might have video solutions for our students. Maybe they go through the video solutions. And then from that, they're taking out any techniques they've learned. There might be ways of getting right questions they got wrong, or just ways of doing things faster, even if they got them right themselves. And making a cheat sheet, so noting down those techniques they've learned, so they can come back and revise them and not forget them in the future. And a student has some tuition on another evening, and then they come to one of our problem-solving workshops for maths and physics on the Friday evening.
Okay, excellent. The other thing is tracking marks. Now, look, you guys are quite early in the process, so you probably aren't going to be starting to do actual past papers right now. But later on in the year, just be aware that you need to make sure you mark your work and act on whatever mark you got. So the other thing you can do though is, well, I mean, you'll be surprised, like the number of people that speak to me, they're like, yeah, I did the math exam, but I didn't really mark it. And it's like, well, if you don't know what mark you got, how can you know how much you need to improve? It's super important to get those metrics. But then act on it. So if there were specific topics that you found more difficult, get more help, do more practice, actually analyze what you did and didn't do well on, and interpret the marks. Are you on track? So for example, here in the CTMUA, I think a 7.2 is what a good score is in the TMUA exam. And that's kind of the average mark for people who actually got in, and 6.6 was the average mark for people who got an interview. You need to mark your work, look at the score conversion and see where you are, because if you're serious about getting in and you only got, I don't know, 6.7, that might not be enough to actually kind of give you the peace of mind that you're highly likely to get an offer. And so you need to put more work in or get more support. And the other thing you can do by doing this is see patterns in your strengths and weaknesses to make sure that you tackle your weaknesses and boost your strengths even further. What do we have next? Struggling for success. I think Chris already alluded to this. It is a mistake to like rush through questions. Oh, I couldn't do it. It's been like a minute. I tried it. I couldn't do it. Let me look at the answer. So looking at solutions too quickly is a big mistake. Not realizing the importance of independent study and struggling. Now, Chris already said, or like maybe redo the questions that you couldn't do the day before. But I would go to the extent of saying, at least this early on, you can spend 3 or 4 days on a question. Take a tough math problem, for example. Oh, I couldn't do it today. I really struggle with part E and F. Maybe I'll sleep on it. I'll try again tomorrow. I'll try again the next day. Maybe at that point, I'll watch a little bit of the video and give myself a hint and then continue. But that struggling that you're doing is actually building up that problem solving. You're thinking of things and then deciding why they didn't work and trying to do something else. But eventually your brain will start to understand how to do these problems quicker. So don't watch or read the solutions too soon, and just get a hint and then look away from the solution so you can do it on your own. And then come back to questions as well later on if you weren't able to do them immediately. And we can compare this to going to the gym. You know, you wouldn't expect to go to the gym once and then become strong. Similarly, you need to do lots of reps, or you need to do a lot of practice or timed work so that you can, or work over a period of time, I should say, so that you can develop that problem solving muscle. Okay. And lastly, feel free to get help when needed. So, you know, if you run a business for parents out here, you might need to get a business consultant to help you with parts of the business that you're not sure how to move forward with. And similarly, having a one-to-one tutor can give students the expertise. Firstly, they obviously know clearly what they're doing. They're highly experienced tutors. Grace and Amir here are 2 of our tutors. But they also give you a huge amount of accountability. If they're telling you by next week you need to do this past paper or these questions, that gives you the accountability and it keeps you on track. They can also help you identify strengths and weaknesses that you weren't necessarily able to identify on your own, and give you more material to improve your performance in those areas. And our tutors are all Oxbridge educated or have PhDs in the relevant subject. Well, I would say 98% of our tutors are Oxbridge educated. They go through a rigorous selection process before they can work with us. Grace and Amir, I'm sure you can attest to that fact that you had to go through quite a rigorous process to be picked. They're both nodding here. And they are also given continual training. We help them with how they can report better and how they can just be as effective as possible to make your learning as good as it can be. So last opportunity then to go to oxbridgeformula.co.uk/stellar-consultation. That is oxbridgeformula.co.uk/stellar-consultation, or you can scan this QR code. Katie says, everything about the program was fantastic, from the incredible tutors to the intriguing questions. I had a great time and was definitely challenged. I could feel myself learning and improving throughout. Thank you so much for all your help. And Manjari, who got into Cambridge, said for maths, the courses really helped me, and I definitely wouldn't have done as well without them. The absolute best part was that they gave me confidence in my own ability, which is absolutely fantastic. And we've got more testimonials, but I'm conscious of time. So let's move to the Q&A. We've got 19 questions in the chat. And let's see what we've got here. Does accounting and finance count as STEM? I'm not sure if it would really. It's more on the finance side. I wouldn't count it as STEM, but I would also say that neither of Oxford or Cambridge actually has an accounting and finance course. So if you are looking to apply to Oxford, you wouldn't be able to apply to accounting and finance.
If you apply for economics and management, there's a significant component
Of accounting and finance within
Yes.
that course. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So accounting, economics and management at Oxford is probably the one you want to look at. Somebody, like a couple of people are saying their children are just starting year 11. Can they still apply to the program? Yes, they can. Absolutely, they can. We have something that they can join. So please feel free to sign up to the consultation. So a question, Grace, for you. To apply for Oxbridge Medicine, are you at a greater advantage if you do 4 A-levels? And if so, does a 4th A-level have to be science, or can you do English, Latin, or a language?
I don't think it's, I didn't do I didn't do 4 A-levels, and they can't actually discriminate on the number of A-levels they do, because some schools only let you do 3. So in my school, it wasn't possible for me to do 4 A-levels. I would recommend sticking to, I think you definitely need chemistry A-level at Oxford. You need another science. You don't actually need biology. I would recommend biology, but you could do physics instead, and ideally do maths. If you were to do a 4th, the subject doesn't matter. If you enjoy it, you can definitely do a language, and you can talk about the communication skills it would give you, which obviously is very important in medicine. My personal advice would be to stick with the 3 that you need, and obviously do those incredibly well, and then use the rest of the time you have wisely. Whether you decide to do an EPQ based on something very related to medicine, or you just decide to really brush up on your BMAT and your UCAT if you're applying to other medical schools, and just spend the extra time doing things like reading around the subject. That'd be my advice. But obviously doing the 4th will not disadvantage you. I just think there's better things that you could do.
Okay. Right, somebody says, if I'm not the top student in my school, is it still useful to apply to the mastermind? Absolutely, probably even better, even more of a reason. If you're really keen to apply to Oxford and Cambridge, and you believe that there is more that you could do, this will definitely help you. How do your chances shift over this timeline? I'm not sure what is meant by that question, if we could have further clarification. Somebody says, my son is going to be in year 9 this September, and he's very good at maths and science. How do we prepare him now to get good grades in his A-levels? I would say the biggest thing I would say is get as much problem solving practice as you possibly can. Amir, I see that you're nodding your head. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, so I'll just introduce myself before I say anything.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to introduce you. Yeah.
My name's Amir, and I'm entering my 3rd year at studying maths at Cambridge. And I'd say if your son is really young and he just wants to get better at maths, he should look at the UKMT. And he doesn't need to do it intensely, but just have a look and you'll get better over time. That's my advice for year 9.
Absolutely, I would completely echo and agree with that advice. I remember for me personally, like I did really well in that UKMT maths challenge, and that's when I sort of realized, oh, maybe this is something I could do at uni. So definitely the maths challenge questions are good ones to prepare you for not only A-levels, but an Oxbridge application. Okay, so Grace, for you, if somebody is aiming for medicine at Oxbridge, would it be wise to focus on the 3 essential sciences rather than take all the sciences? I think we've kind of already answered that question. I don't know if you want to add anything more to that.
No, I think exactly the same as I said before. I did, if it helps, biology, chemistry and maths with an AS in geography, just because I like doing geography. So there's definitely like a flexibility in it, as long as you have the key skills. Once you have your academics, it's very much getting yourself to interview. And when you're at interview, the only thing that matters is how you perform in that interview. So I would say, in terms of the stuff that you need, do the bare minimum and do it very well. So do those 3 A levels and get yourself the A stars. I think it is still, it's not numerical yet. It's to get your A stars and do very well in your admissions exams.
Yeah. And somebody's asking how much maths there is in the BMAT.
Not loads in terms of, so section 1 is problem solving, and I do think having a core maths knowledge is useful. They don't go beyond GCSE maths, so they cannot put A-level maths in the BMAT exam. Section 2, you do have GCSE maths questions. I wouldn't worry if you aren't taking maths. If you have the choice to do maths, I would recommend it. You do have statistics modules for medicine at university, but there are resources out there to help you with your maths, so I wouldn't get panicked about it.
Okay. So yes, another person asking about year 10 and 11 students, absolutely, that's something that we provide. So get signed up to a consultation. Any questions, please, in the Q&A rather than the chat would be really helpful. Will the computer science interview questions be similar to maths interview questions? Basically, in a word, yes. There are some differences, but I don't know, Amir, if you necessarily have any experience of computer scientists and how their questions differed from yours.
Yeah, from what I've seen, they do ask maths questions, but it's a certain type of maths. So they'll stray away from mechanics and calculus, and it'll be more like logic, like this a specific type of maths questions. That's what I'd say.
So more like logic. I've heard of like number theory, combinatorial.
Yeah, that kind of thing. I think
don't worry if these
paper.
Sorry.
They have an admissions test. You can have a look at the kind of questions they ask.
It's called the CSAT.
Yeah, I think that's for Cambridge. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say, but I think they can ask calculus questions, by the way, as well. So I would say that there is a big overlap between the types of questions you can be asked in a maths and computer science interview, but often you then will have another interview which is more based around like maths with algorithmic thinking. Chris, I don't know if you want to add any more to this.
I think I'd just be repeating the same things. You can be asked anything from A-level. It does tend to be the more pure and discrete maths. So mechanics is quite unlikely, unless you say you're really into mechanics. Yeah.
Okay. And probability can actually come up, I would say, in mechanics, computer science interviews as well. Is the course only 1 year, or do you distribute it over 2 years? Basically, the course will end when you finish your Oxbridge application. So it starts whenever you start, and we make sure that it ends at the time at which you end the Oxbridge application. Okay, the worksheet that we sent out yesterday should have been sent to your email. Don't worry if you can't get it now, because we showed everything already. For a computer science course, what should we prepare to make a strong application? So, Chris, is that something that you would feel comfortable answering?
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit on whether it's Oxford or Cambridge, but they're mostly the same. They both have the 2 hurdles we discussed already, the admissions test and the interview. The personal statement isn't that important for computer science. They do mostly want to see you're good at maths, basically, and algorithmic thinking, as Power said. So in that case, it's practicing past admissions test questions. We did briefly mention the CSAT for Cambridge. So Cambridge switched from the CSAT to the TMUA. So there were like 2 sets of past papers. It's worth practicing both, but the CSAT questions are maybe more useful as interview practice now. And you want to be doing lots of TMUA practice. But just any maths problem solving you could be doing is the most important thing.
Yeah, okay. Somebody's asking about...
I just want to say there's no specific computer science knowledge you're expected to have for either university. So it's not like you have to learn C++. That's not the case. They'd like to see you're interested. You've done something computer science related, but there's no specific syllabus for your application.
I would say that, like, yeah, doing programming and that kind of thing is going to be useful, because you're going to start thinking in the way that you would need to solve these algorithmic problems, I would guess.
Yeah.
And also, I would be wondering, like, why do you want to apply to computer science if you haven't done that kind of thing? So taking an interest in coding or programming would be important. Somebody's asking here about intending to defer so you can get home fees. I would say that we more focus on the academic aspects of things. I'm not sure if, I don't think you would enter that information on your personal statement, no, but I'm not sure. So I don't want to tell you information that I'm not fully sure about. Probably better to get advice maybe from your school on that one. Okay, how relevant would competitions, e.g. placing top 5 in a US maths competition or qualifying for a country level robotics, be in secondary school, year 9, when writing your personal statement, applying for computer science? I'd say in principle, those things sound really good, but if it's like 3 or 4 years ago, compared to when you're applying, it feels like it would be less relevant. And you ideally would have won some competitions kind of closer to the time. And if you do, then that kind of thing is really, really worth putting in, I would say. Chris, would you agree or me?
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't done anything else recently, you can mention it in like one line in your personal statement. It's probably not going to have an effect one way or the other. So, yeah.
Maya, I also forgot that you're here. So if there's any questions that you feel like you could answer as well, just unmute and I can ask you as well. So I think another question about starting year 10. Yeah, get yourself booked into a consultation. There's absolutely things we can do. I would say that for younger students, we start off on a more one-to-one basis. Then we introduce the workshops and then we introduce the courses. So absolutely no problem at all. Is economics and management more maths-based or more essay-based? I would say it's probably the management side of it is more essay-based. The math side of it will have, sorry, the economic side of it will have some maths, but also essays. Chris, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's not as mathematical as the Cambridge economics course, but there's components of both.
Okay, somebody's asking what resources mentioned. It's the United Kingdom Mathematics Trust, UKMT. It's called the Maths Challenge. If you just type in Google Maths Challenge, UKMT Maths Challenge, that's what you want to search for. How important is playing a musical instrument for Oxbridge? Well, if you remember, piano was on our not important list for all of them. It's not really that important for Oxbridge. Is switching to MEng better than BEng for computer science? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by switching?
They might be saying like choosing whether to stay for 3 or 4 years, but which you can do at Oxford, but you wouldn't say when you apply.
Yeah. Like in my one, I had the opportunity to get a BA after 3 years, or if I stayed for a 4th year, I could get an M Math. I decided to leave after 3 years, so I only had to let them know in the 3rd year.
But also, yeah, I don't think you want to say when you're applying. Yeah, I only want to be there for 3 years. I don't want to do 4 in the subject. It doesn't sound very enthusiastic.
Yeah.
It is worth noting that for chemistry at Oxford, if anyone's looking at that, it's compulsory to do 4 years, so you can't actually finish after the 3 years, so everyone gets the masters.
Okay, good to know. That's very helpful. Is it necessary to take maths, computer science, physics, and further maths at A level to do computer science at university? Or can I drop further maths or physics after AS? So I wouldn't say necessary. It's not necessary to take all of them. However, do I think it would be extremely helpful and beneficial? Yes. So maths, computer science, physics, and further maths. You can do one of them at AS, but I know all 4 subjects are highly valued by the computer science department at Cambridge. We actually went to a talk, as I said, Chris and I went to a talk, and the computer science director of studies said that they would prefer you to have, say, physics than they would to just have like an IT qualification. So yeah, I don't know.
I think I was actually told like the order of importance is maths, which is completely compulsory, then further maths, then physics and computer science equal. Because the A-level computer science degree is nice, but the knowledge isn't necessary for the university course. I think if you don't have the opportunity to take further maths, that's fine. But if you take it and then you drop it after a year, that looks a bit suspicious. It's like, why did this person not enjoy further maths?
Yeah, So, I mean, the other thing I would say is for computer science at Cambridge or even Oxford, it's super competitive. There are a lot of people who are going to be getting like 4A-star predictions, frankly, even within the pool of applicants which are rejected. So if you can do all 4 subjects for this particular subject for computer science, and you think you'll do well at all of them, but again, I think I'd echo Grace, like only if you can do well at all of them, then I might even consider doing all 4, to be honest. So yeah. Last one, is it advantageous to take A-level further maths for economics and management? I think it could be helpful, but it's this one isn't necessary. I think if you didn't do further maths, you'd be okay, but I would recommend doing maths. I think maths might be compulsory actually for economics and management. Great, any more? That was our last question. We've got a couple in the other chat. So say that somebody has appropriate GCSE and A-level grades, what would a competitive BMAT score be for Oxford medicine? I think we're looking at something like a 6.0 would be a good place to kind of be aiming for on sections A and B.
So it's scored between 0 and 9. So around 6 is my experience of just looking at my cohort and the people I'm with. The average score was about a 6.0 for section 1 and section 2. And then the essay is a bit more flexible, which is section 3. Ideally be scoring a 4. 5 is the maximum, so anywhere between a 4 and a 5. And then grammar is between A and E, but no one has an issue with grammar, so A or B is completely fine.
Okay, excellent. So if you guys lastly would think that that's been helpful, and I mean, imagine if that's just been helpful within a free 2-hour talk, how much support is going to be available for you guys as part of the program, then get yourself booked in at oxbridgeformula.co.uk/, actually I think that link is wrong. We ideally want the Stellar-consultation, and we'll put that in the chat now, if that's all right, Maya. That would be fantastic. I think we'll leave it there. So that's all we have. What I would like to do for the few of you who are still on the call, quite a few of you are still on the call, can you put in the chat to me, what is the number one thing that you're going to take away from this and apply to your own life or your own application in order to maximize your chances of getting that offer? So what is the one thing that you will take away from today? And put it in the chat to me now. I'll read those out. While we're waiting for those to come in, I just want to say a huge thanks to all of the guests that we had. Amir for stepping in at the last minute, for Grace, brilliant as usual. Maya as well for your input, Lucy, and Chris, and Ben as well, who was helping with tech. So somebody said that it's really important to do problem solving questions. That's the number one thing they've learned. That they should schedule their own timetable and a study planner. Now you said I need to do it for my son. I actually disagree. I think your son needs to do it for himself. Because number one thing, I genuinely believe that if the parent needs to be involved, but if the motivation doesn't come from the child, they're probably not going to be suitable candidates for Oxbridge anyway. There's a lot of independent study that's required and they need to be motivated. Somebody said that they're thankful that we run these workshops to help students do their best. You're most welcome. Somebody said it's important to plan and start early. Yes, absolutely. Somebody said the knowledge of the magnitude of necessary work for preparation and the specific skills needed. The amount of work you have to be prepared to do and the amount of time you have to be prepared to sacrifice. Now, it's an interesting use of vocabulary there, because I wouldn't call it a sacrifice, because I would say if you really love your subjects, then doing more work in that subject shouldn't feel like a sacrifice. It should actually feel like fun. So I think that's where that passion part of it comes into it. Somebody else says, thank you very much for the webinar. It was very informative. I have a quick request from all of you. If you have found this webinar informative and you have friends who are also applying to Oxbridge, or you have friends whose children are going to be applying to Oxbridge, what we're going to do after this webinar is send you through a sign-up link which you can share with them. And I'd be really, really grateful if you could share that link with them and allow them to watch a replay of the webinar as well. But I want to thank you all for taking this time on a Sunday morning to join us. And I'm glad that we were able to help. And I wish your children or yourselves, if you're the child here, the best of luck with your application, and I hope we're able to support you in your journey further going forward. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.